All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You have just landed on Mars. Thanks for tuning in and being with us tonight. As usual, we have people in attendance from across the U.S., from Massachusetts, Florida, Alabama, Texas, Illinois, Nevada, and even from Mexico. We appreciate your continued interest in the school and for everyone attending our events. And while I have this opportunity, I'd like to wish everyone a happy Easter and a happy Passover. It's hard to believe, but M.A.R.S will be celebrating 30 years this May, and we've been a leading PPA school all of that time. We've also been doing webinars for the last 15 years, so we're very proud to provide a quality educational experience. And this evening's program is no exception with the amazingly talented Rick Friedman, who is on assignment in Phoenix, Arizona. Rick is brought to you in part by Tamron. Tamron has been a supporter of M.A.R.S for over 20 years, and we welcome them back and again in 2026. They will be on site answering all your questions. And the best part is you can try out the lens of your choice for an entire day for free. See firsthand Tamron's superb fusion of quality, performance, and value. So come to the school and check it out. You might even win a Tamron lens. I'd like to thank Tamron, Stacy and Heather and Damien for the support, and Reps Patty and Ken for being in attendance, helping the students out. Just one of the many perks of attending M.A.R.S. Now, a little background about our speaker tonight. Rick Friedman has been a photojournalist, portrait, and travel photographer for over 44 decades. Sorry, Rick.
I'm old, I'm not that old.
And I think I've been trying to get him to the school for 25% of that time. He travels the world for numerous publications, corporations, advertising assignments, and film and television productions. His published work has appeared in Time, National Geographic, Newsweek, New York Times, Washington Post, Boston Globe, Nature, USA Today, The Guardian, Der Spiegel, Stern, Discover, and on ABC, CBS, CNN, NBC, Discovery Channel, Saturday Night Live, The Late Show, and many others around the globe. He has produced over 75 book and magazine covers and has worked on 20 film productions. Rick, known for his practical creative lighting, has been teaching for the last 20 years. He has taught workshops at Photo Plus, WPPI, Imaging USA, SWPP London, Exposure UAE, PPOC in Canada, White House News Photographers Association, Can-Am Photo Expo, and numerous PPA events, just to name a few. So, needless to say, we are fortunate to have the renowned Rick Friedman instruct for an entire week this May during M.A.R.S 2026, our 30th anniversary at the beautiful Hyatt Place in Dewey Beach, Delaware. Rick's storytelling ability and approach to his craft will not only engage and amuse you, but energize you to perform. In his class at M.A.R.S 2026, he'll be delivering a no-holds-barred week of information that will ignite your passion. He'll cover many creative techniques, tips, and tricks to help take your photography to a new level. And this is all the best location, featuring the best amenities and the best instructors, like Rick, to provide the best overall experience of any other event of its kind. As the only all-inclusive PPA school in the country, where a week of instruction, hotel accommodations, meals, parties, prizes, and more are included with your tuition, M.A.R.S is in a class by itself. If you've never been, now is the time to attend as we celebrate 30 years of educational excellence. Visit our website at www.marsschool.com and register today. But do it before it's too late. There are only 6 days left until registration closes. Now, let's get on with our featured webinar tonight with Rick Friedman. Rick is happy to answer your questions. So at any time, please use your question pane to type in, and we'll ask when appropriate. So without further delay, I'd like to present the speaker for this evening, the incomparable, inimitable, and ever loquacious Rick Friedman. Rick, if you're out there,
I am here.
Take that presentation over, brother.
All right. Well, let me see. I get to show my screen here. There we go. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. And what I want to do this evening is show you a little bit of some of the work that I've done and give you a little bit of the backstories. When we're at M.A.R.S, we're going to have a lot of time to really go into how things are created. And in my workshops, by the way, the subtitle of my workshop is Lighting and Laughing. So I want people to have a good time. I want them to learn a lot, ask a lot of questions. We will literally bring as much photo and lighting gear as we could possibly cram in a Jeep Grand Cherokee, which will be a lot. So today I am just outside of Phoenix. Starting tomorrow, we have a 5-day corporate shoot, a little bit further away from where I am. So I thought, if I'm sitting out here and it's 98 degrees, I should enjoy the heat while my friends back home in Boston are dealing with snow. So anyway, I'm going to just kind of go over some things. I welcome your questions. One of the things I say about my work is that I specialize in not specializing. So that's actually me, by the way, as a longtime magazine photographer and corporate photographer, I go into a lot of situations which I have virtually no planning time. Folks who work in big studios have plenty of time to plan. A lot of my assignments come up and say, go now. So I'm just going to run through some pictures and tell you a little bit about some of them, get a little bit of a variety of what it is that we do. So obviously this is Rihanna, who was absolutely a delight to work with. So, and again, when I meet you folks, I'll tell you a little more about it. This was Tony Bennett, done at the Montreal Jazz Fest for People magazine. And this was actually after his presentation. I went up to the stage when he was greeting folks, and he saw me and said, "What would you like to do?" And I laughingly said, "I'd like you to come back out and perform for me," which the wonderful gentleman did. So he's actually performing for my assistant and I. Why am I blanking on her name? Cynthia Erivo, excuse me. So this was her about a year ago, being roasted as the Harvard Hasty Pudding Woman of the Year. This is actually during a parade going down Massachusetts Avenue. Goldie Hawn, now Goldie, this was another People magazine shoot. And I believe that when you go to a shoot, you don't show up a couple of minutes before and start taking things out of cases. You get there early and go into the room and be ready to go to work. So this photograph was taken almost a half hour before my time to work with her. But I was there, I was ready, my camera was ready, my strobe was ready. And she came out of the back room and saw an old friend. And that's her reacting to seeing an old friend. I knew I had my picture, but I still wanted my half hour with Goldie Hawn. Jennifer Garner, also done at the Harvard Theatricals Hasty Pudding. And I've covered this event for many years, and a lot of people want to ride on the press truck on the parade. And I don't want to be on the press truck because I don't want to make the same picture that 12 other photographers are making. If you're out there, you want to do something unique, different. The way journalism is set up today, you need to have a different picture if you're going to make any money out of it. And again, when we're at M.A.R.S, I will be happy to explain how one survives as a freelance photojournalist, and kind of go into how stock pictures and how you make somewhat of a living selling them. This is actually the front of my studio. So she's leaning on my stairs. We've actually done a lot of shoots here. Obviously, you can see we've got a light behind her with a CTO filter, a color temperature orange filter on it, bring out the pretty highlights in her hair, and then we have a strobe in front of her. And then we took out the garden hose and soaked the sidewalk, so you got reflections. Sir Anthony, who was, again, one of the most wonderful people to photograph. He was just amazing. Again, it's also done for People. And he showed up for the photo shoot by himself. I went, and one of the things, that I feel is very important is to know everything you can know about your subject, even if your subject is as famous as Anthony Hopkins. So we made a point of watching his first 3 movies before we went to meet the gentleman. And when I asked him a question about one of his early movies, He said, when did you see this? I said, yesterday. He said, why? He said, because I was going to get to meet you today. And no matter who your subject is, that shows your subject that you care enough to learn about your subject. And I also feel, you know, I have the best job in the world. I get paid to run around the world, play with my toys, and hang out with fascinating people. And it would be foolish to not gain as much knowledge as I can from some of the people I get to meet. And a little further down, you'll get to see some of the, I photograph a lot of academics. So now, real quick though, on the lighting, okay? So this is a lit photograph. We have a huge 7-foot octa. Back then I was shooting Dynalights, and then just a big reflector on the other side and that sheer curtain. So we're gaining some exposure from outside. And I was saying, you start your exposure with the element you cannot control. The element I can't control is the outside light. And again, we will go into how you do all this. Whoops, hold on. Come back. That's Ella Fitzgerald. For those of you that are old enough to remember Ella Fitzgerald. And that's her green and yellow basket. There we go. Little Richard, who was every bit as much fun as you thought he would be to photograph. This is John Updike, the author, who I had the honor to work with 6 times. And if you ever read any of John Updike's books, I mean, it was just a treat to get to work with this man. Like, I feel that way about virtually all the people I've had the honor to photograph, but John was just amazing. But if you look at this picture, again, we got there early. Keiko Hiromi, he's my shooting partner. And I get there early, and we're there long before the reporters were there. So this was done during an interview for Der Spiegel magazine. And we walk in, we're looking at the room. I see the mirror. Keiko happens to walk behind the table. I see the reflections, and it's like, let's set up so John has to be in that seat. Because in a situation like this, once the reporters come in and they start the interview, you can't direct, you can't interrupt, you can't say, please look this way. And, you know, you can't actually fire too many frames because the strobes will be annoying. So you're kind of, you know, every frame has to count. Bill Gates, it's another one that the photograph was created before the shoot. So we are there, and Keiko is very good at doting over people, and Keiko kind of adjusts his jacket and says to Bill Gates, do you have car keys in your pocket? Like he drove himself to the photo shoot. So he's feeling like he has keys in his pocket. And again, I knew I had the picture before the session ever started, but we did take the time to get to chat with him, because that's the best part of the gig, is being able to talk to the folks. This is John Ratzenberger, alias Cliff Clavin from Cheers. And when Cheers wrapped 2 years after that, John had a TV series for several seasons called Made in America. And I was the show still photographer, and I get to travel all over the country with John and go to these various places. And this day we were sailing old sailboats under the Newport Bridge. If anybody has a question, you want to throw it out, I'm more than happy to talk and answer questions. So this particular photograph, this is called 3 Guys on a Couch. It's just 3 guys sitting on a couch, unless you happen to know who they are. So they are Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones, Chuck Berry in the middle, and Leonard Cohen. You take a look at this picture and look out the window, I have a deep blue sky. So what I've done, and I have 1 speed light. And, you know, this particular situation, I know the room, it's a small room. And I literally left the rest of my gear out in the hallway. Camera, wide angle lens, 1 speed light on top of it. And this was before I was using Pro Photos. If you haven't used Pro Photos, go try them. They're awesome. In fact, the lighting on me right now is the lights from a Pro Photo B20, B30. They're the modeling lights to balance the light out. So anyway, a bit of the backstory on this: Chuck Berry and Keith Richards had a multi-year feud, and this was the first time they'd gotten along in about 20 plus years. And again, I get to this shoot early. I walk into this room and there's no one else in the room but Chuck Berry sitting on a couch. And in my head, I'm going, hi, Chuck. Hi, Mr. Berry. What sound? I went with, hi, I'm Rick. I'll be your photographer. And nobody else showed up for about 20 minutes. So we chatted and he played with my cameras and, we had a great time. And as everybody else came into the room, he introduced me like we were all friends, which meant I already had it in. And it was interesting. The client said to me on this, Chuck, the only people that told me were going to be there were Chuck Berry and Leonard Cohen, and the client said, do you think you can get them in the same frame? To which I'm thinking, if they're in the same building, I'm going to get them in the same frame. So anyway, that was one. And there's actually another frame that is not in this presentation, but a variation of this with Peter Wolf, who used to be my neighbor. And that particular one's in Peter's book. So be ready on a photo shoot. Like the last frame, it just happened. This one, the two of them are standing there and they see me and they sort of lean over to my camera and I'm shooting it with a very wide angle lens. But you've got to be ready. Experiment all you want with your gear at home. Torture your friends and neighbors to learn how to do it. But when you get there, everything has to work. This is Dan Brown, who wrote the Da Vinci Code. And, because we had this curved white wall, all I needed was one strobe because I knew I would get a bounce off of that curved white wall like it was a big reflector. This is Margaret Atwood, who wrote The Handmaid's Tale at like 4 o'clock on an August afternoon in the Boston Public Garden. This is some kid at Harvard trying to get a date. So that is Zuckerberg and Chris Hughes about 2 months after they started Facebook. And an editor called me up and said, go to Harvard and take a picture of this kid, Mark Zuckerberg, and gave me his phone number. And that's what we came up with. I have this thing. I like balustrades. I like red brick. I like columns, which makes Boston a really good town to work in. So this is, we just, went over to Harvard and they actually live in that building behind them. And I just found the right angle and, how to balance the ambient light with the light on them. And it was done with a speed light in the corner. That's all we used to fill it in.
Hey, Rick, a quick question.
Most certainly.
Yeah, when you're working, whether it's on location like the one with Zuckerberg or indoors, and you're going on assignment, how many lights do you like to work with?
I'm laughing because I used to have an assistant who said I never saw a picture you could light with 2 lights, and I didn't want to light with 12. It really depends on what I'm doing. So if like the job here, I know I'm going to need big lights. So I have ProPhoto B20s and B30s, which are 250 and 500 watt second lights. However, if I'm going on an assignment, if it is real news, and I still go out and I cover real news on the streets. I don't do car crashes and fires anymore, but I do some things, and that I will go out with 2 cameras, Tamron 17 to 50 on one, Tamron 50 to 400 on the other, and 1 ProPhoto A10 speed light. Now, if I'm going somewhere where I'm going to be able to set up on location, and I move everything in think tank cases, and they recently came out with a 4-wheeler, which is the best thing for moving heavy camera equipment. So on a job like that, I will probably take 2 A10s, which are the speed lights, and 2 A2s, which are really small studio type strobes. They're about the size of a beer can, and they weigh about 1.5 pounds, which means you can put them on carbon fiber light stands. So all of a sudden, you've gone from carrying all this weight to a head and a light stand that weighs under 3 pounds. So anywhere between 1 strobe and 4 for a lot of assignments. And then you'll see some soon that we'll go through more. So does that answer the question without actually answering it?
100%.
Okay. Anyway, this was, like I said, Julia Childs, who I photographed several years ago. And obviously this was shot on slide film. And back in the days when we shot slide film, for those of you who are old enough to have shot slide film, if you missed by more than half a stop, it wasn't much good. And on top of that, working for the magazines, you shipped everything out unprocessed. Excuse me. So you have a half a stop leeway. Obviously, it's not digital, so we can't see the image. And you're sending it out sight unseen. So you kind of had to get really good at hitting your exposures. But I was the one who actually scammed the slide, which I should not be allowed to do. And when I found it not too long ago, you can't believe what went into cleaning this up. But I put it through a Voto, and which is a whole other thing. We'll maybe get into a little more processing later, but we were able to clean it up pretty good. Excuse me. This is actually the picture that launched my career as a magazine photographer. This is Arthur Fiedler, who conducted the Boston Pops on the Charles River Esplanade, which is a big bandstand show, is how to describe it. And it was going to be the first time in 50 years the maestro wasn't going to conduct the July 4th concert. And on a whim, I went and rang his doorbell. And the May didn't want to let me in, but the maestro said that he would see me. And I went into his bedroom, and he was sitting there reading sheet music. So at that point, I worked for UPI. And of course, everything we did on a wire service back then was black and white. But I had a roll of Ektachrome in my bag, and I shot that. And, when I have a little more time, I'll share the full story of how this one photograph on a whim launched my entire magazine career. This is Vincent Price in the Boston Public Garden. And I was photographing him on the set of Mystery Theater for USA Today. I used to work for them a tremendous amount. And, he said, we were in the studio. He said, what else would you like to do? And I jokingly said, let's go to the public garden. It's a beautiful day. To which he said, okay, let's go. And we get to his hotel, and he says to me, I just have to run upstairs and ask my wife if this is okay. He didn't have to ask a publicist, a manager, a lawyer. He had to get his wife's permission. Anyway, he was great. Kermit and Jim Henson, when Jim Henson's daughter was on the staff of the Harvard Lampoon. So Kermit was the senior class day speaker, one of the better ones. This proves that being totally out of position sometimes works out. This was actually my very first out-of-town assignment. And back then, to cover a papal trip, you got one paper credential with no picture on it. That was good for the whole trip. It didn't have location, it just had your name. And I joined an organization called Black Star, which was a great photo agency in its day. And my instruction said, go to St. Patrick's Cathedral. So I did. And I was so new, like I said, my first out-of-town assignment, I didn't realize I was supposed to go look for the press entrance to go to St. Patrick's Cathedral. So I did. I walked in, I stood there, and as I'm looking around going, where is everybody? The door opens and the Pope walks in. And again, be ready. Have your gear ready to go. Great moments don't happen again. Everybody knows who this is. For those of you who don't, this is Ansel Adams. A portrait that I did of him when he was getting an honorary doctorate at Harvard. And I shot the picture, but that's his signature on it. This is the Dresden Dolls, which no longer exist as a band, but this was their studio that actually wasn't very far from my studio. This is Henry Louis Gates, fairly old picture of Skip Gates. And we got there and he said, I really want the Du Bois statue in the picture. So we kind of set the picture up around the statue. And I think this was probably 4 lights, one of which is down low, and to intentionally throw the shadow on the wall. And as we're lighting the wall, we've got a yellow filter on the strobes. I do a lot with gels. And then if you look in the upper left corner, you see the drop off of the light. And in order to get that, we just took some cine foil, which is black tin foil made by Roscoe, and bent it so the light dropped off. Cine foil is one of the great light shaping tools. Oh, we already had you. Go ahead, Mark. You don't get it twice. So obviously this is Gronk, and SI really wanted him in a weight room, and I was told that I would have no more than 10 minutes. And then the communications guy said to me, "You're only getting 10 minutes because you're from Sports Illustrated." So, and I know working for SI, and I've done quite a number of portraits for them. They have great action photographers. I'm not good enough to be one of those. But I knew I was only going to have a couple of minutes to photograph him. So I went in with an assistant way ahead of time, and we brought the strobes in, and we actually photographed 3 different shoots. Well, he gave us more than 10 minutes because he liked my assistant, you know. He thought she was cute. But you can see, you know, when you're working with somebody as an athlete, you know, you want to use some backlight. So we have a strip light on either side behind him that accentuates his physique. And this is the only time I have felt small in many years. So, well, he's a big man. Okay, I got to give you the backstory on all of this. I'm going to speculate that the majority of the people who are watching this and listening have probably seen this photograph or something else from this take. So I will quickly share the backstory of how these pictures exist. 2004, I get an assignment from Focus magazine in Germany. And they say to me, "Rick, there's an event at Harvard next week. They're billing it as the Great Minds of Cambridge. Would you like to photograph it?" And I love photographing academia, as you'll see in a little while. And anyway, I knew there were about 40 noted academics from Harvard and MIT. And I knew, probably photographed almost half of them by that point. And I could recognize everybody but 2 people in the room. And one of them, I was talking to the gentleman, it was Robert Trivers from Princeton. And the other gentleman, every time I got to take a picture, you know, he would pop into the photograph. So I asked one of the professors that I knew, "Who is this gentleman?" And he said, "Oh, that's Jeffrey. He just gave us $16 million. And being a good journalist, I thought, if he gave you $16 million, I should really get some pictures of him." And then the story ran, and one other picture ran. And, you know, how it works on assignments is I shoot it, the magazine gets it, they get first time world rights, and then it moves on to my agency who tries to relicense. Anyway, these pictures didn't sell for 10 years. And then all of a sudden they were everywhere. So this one's been all over the place. That's him and Alan Dershowitz. So we needed something light after that. So this was for a story on Gillette. And I'm not sure this cage still exists, but I shot this a number of years ago, and men who worked in the Gillette research facility were expected to shave at work every day. So they would come into this room, these separate little rooms, and there'd be different cans of shaving cream and different razors, and they were supposed to shave and try the stuff, and then fill out a little form what they thought of each thing. So your chances of actually getting all these people with shaving cream on their faces out the window like this weren't very good. So I have to admit, this one I kind of set up, but the set was there. And occasionally I get to go to Fenway Park and shoot baseball. So I spend a lot of time, and have my entire career, as I describe it, I spend a lot of time with people who think they're eminently qualified to screw up the country. Whatever your political beliefs are, I have covered every major presidential candidate from Jimmy Carter to our current president. Some of them I've traveled with, some of them I get to know. And it's fascinating because I start this generally long before most people care about it. So I'll go to events and there won't be many people there, which is what makes it fun. This was way up in Berlin, New Hampshire. This one here, I thought I'd throw back in. I'm actually going to do a workshop in Little Rock in July. And they said, "Do you have any pictures you want to send us?" So I sent him this. And he actually had to carry that canvas bag because in New Hampshire, nobody knew Bill Clinton was. So, and this was Hillary's reaction to the whole thing. I actually had several book covers of my photographs of books about Hillary. This one, I came across this the other day and thought I'd added back in. So this is John McCain and Cindy McCain when he was the leading candidate for president. He's got Secret Service protection, and he's flying on his chartered jet, and the pre-TSA people are still wanting him. How I got into that room, I have no idea, because I wasn't on the charter. I just kind of, when you do this stuff, you want to get to know not only your subjects, but you want to get to know the folks they work with. If you can't get past the doorkeeper, you're not going to get a picture. And this, on this campaign, I knew everybody. It was like, Rick, go ahead. You may end up to be president one day, but you may not get a chair. This was actually during his second attempt to run for president, which went about as well as his first. This is my favorite bartender. This was at a closed event in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. It wasn't on the schedule, and I figured out where they were going to go by subtly asking questions. Simple question of the staff, question you say to a Secret Service agent, I know you can't tell me, but. And I showed up at the door, and there was an agent standing there, and he just looked at me and said, Rick, go, somebody else will throw your ass out. Because I knew the agent. I knew I wasn't a threat. Yeah, I was saying, never have an argument with an officer with a badge and a gun. You're not going to win. This is called, I didn't name it, but obviously this is called The Laughing Clintons, and it's been published hundreds of times. And if you work the way I work, especially with the editorial work, the ability to relicense your work. The Epstein pictures, I have no idea how many times they've been published. It's just, I showed up late and I knew the doorkeeper, and they kind of went, Rick, you go hide in the corner. And this is him right before he went on stage. This would never happen today with the leading presidential candidate, that you would be that close to him and his wife on his birthday. That was shot with a 24mm lens. That was my first Newsweek cover. And I thought, wow, getting Newsweek covers is easy. It took me 7 years to get my second one. Nelson Mandela. Sometimes you're shooting and they just shoot back. So this, we're going to come up on another reenactment of this. So April 19th last year, which was the beginning of the American Revolution, the shot heard around the world in Lexington, which if you're going to cover that event, you have to be there like at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then there are hundreds and hundreds of people, photographers everywhere. After that, they do this running 5-mile battle down Battle Road. I think there were 4 photographers covering it. We had like complete access to everything. It was like, having 720 extras. So, and these are the Patriots shooting back. So, when you're doing this kind of thing, you have to determine your exposure, because you want the muzzle flash. You don't want to be shooting at, a speed that you get movement, but you want to capture the feeling of it. There's also a lot of time where, and you'll see this in a lot of my work outdoors, where you're balancing strobe and ambient light. And so this gentleman, and you may not recognize who this gentleman is, but we all use this gentleman's work. This gentleman is Sir Tim Berners-Lee, and Sir Tim is the gentleman who actually invented the World Wide Web. He's the guy who did it. And that was done for the Guardian magazine. And we were supposed to have 1 hour to shoot a magazine cover, an inside picture. And oh yeah, the reporter had to do the interview. So the reporter took 1 hour 10, which left me -10. And Tim is very nice. He said, Rick, I'm really sorry, but I really have to go. I have a plane to catch. And I said, well, can I walk down the hallway with you? And he said, okay. And then he, we'd scouted this. So this is the status center at MIT. And Keiko and I had scouted this location. I said, Tim, can we go out this door? He went, okay. And I did one of these, oh my God, look at the light, look at the light. And Keiko's already holding the strobe in the right place. And we got 3 frames off. This was the magazine cover. This is, we do a lot with light painting. So this is a single frame. The way this is done, it's about a 30-second exposure, and we rehearse it and we tape off places on the floor that the model can feel. So she's in position 1, you fire the strobe. She moves to position 2, you fire the strobe. She moves to position 3, you fire the strobe. While this is happening, Karen is in the background light painting. This we use a Savage wand, and she is creating this background. You'll see several things of Karen's ability to light paint. And Karen will be there at M.A.R.S to help out. She's standing right next to me, which is why all this is working. Karen will be there to help out with everything. I tell people, if you take my class, you actually get 2 instructors. So anyway, she'll be there to help out. So this particular assignment, we get a lot of assignments like this. Go to a portrait of professor. That's it. There's nothing else. So I could barely understand this guy's bio, let alone what he really does. But I know he did quantum computing, and that's a quantum computer behind him. And I found this model of a molecule on his desk. And I said, can we use this? And he said, sure. So I'm shooting it with a wide angle lens, and I'm actually holding the model of the molecule. And you can see we've lit him from one side, but you notice the background's all blue. Well, we gelled the background. And then you'll notice the underside of the molecule is green. So there's a strobe underneath with a green gel. And when you start working with a lot of colors, it's really important that white light does not hit your colors. If white light hits your colors, it'll blow your colors away. So you want to make sure, I call it lighting in elements. So you light the subject, and when you do that test shot, and quite often the assistant, or one of my partners, will stand in, and the test shot should be like, the room should be totally black, except they should be lit, because I don't want the white light spilling onto the background, because I'm going to make the background blue. And it's the same thing with the light paint. So this is Karen. Everybody say hi to Karen and Keiko and myself. And we're on our way to the exposure photo workshop. Basically, you fly into Dubai. And we didn't have much luggage on that gig. So that's the amount of luggage. I don't remember what the excess baggage charges were, but they were pretty high. Although on this trip, it's just Karen and I, we actually have more or less the same amount of equipment. This is my office. This is my editor. Ella's working really hard. And this is one of my other assistants in a really bad mood. And this is just somebody else we work with goofing off. No, the last 2 pictures actually came from an assignment that Karen and I had in South Africa, where we were asked to go to South Africa and do a story on a big cat rescue reserve called Four Paws, a Lion's Rock. And so these are some of these 2 cats, not the one on my light table, but these 2 cats are actually, they were cats that lived in horrible zoos and could not survive in the wild. And this is where they rescue them. And they lived, the cages are several miles by several miles. There are about 100 of these big cats. You should hear them roar at sunset. It's great. And doing a little bit of models. So this is a wonderful model that we worked with down in St. Augustine. And probably on the model is standing in front of a gray backdrop. That's it. So we start out, we light the model. And again, I know we're going to color the backdrop. So I don't want the light on the young lady's face to be hitting my backdrop. Sorry, it's a little toasty out here. So we light her, and then we put a highlight on her hair. And if you look around the top of her head, you can see a bit of purple. So there's a strobe directly behind her head with a purple filter on it facing the camera. Very important that obviously that light is directly behind the young lady's head. Then we take another strobe with a blue gel on it and blow it at the background. And you'll actually see, if you look at the background, you'll see a little highlights and shadows. And that strobe on the background with the blue gel on it is actually being shot through Karen cutout. When you project it, looks like Venetian blinds. And it's actually cut out of a big piece of cinefoil. That gives us the highlights and shadows. And then the smoke is from a Smoke Ninja, which is a great toy, an inexpensive portable smoke machine. And the light that's lighting the smoke is another strobe with another purple filter on it. When you're playing with smoke, it's really important that you backlight the smoke. Backlight, if you front light the smoke, if you see it at all, you'll be flattening it out. If you backlight it, it makes it much more three-dimensional. So this is Ray Kurzweil. Ray Kurzweil was one of the very early people in artificial intelligence. Ray, I remember him telling me 20 odd years ago that eventually the computers are going to get so smart, they're going to take over. Well, we're close. Anyway, Ray had written a book about eating healthy and that you'd live a long time. You ate really healthy, which I probably am not a good example of that. But anyway, so Ray, we went to Ray's office, and Ray's actually lying on his office floor. I knew this was going to be a fun challenge. We talked to his associate about it, came up with what food we needed to have with the fish. And so we go and we roll out a roll of blue paper, and then we take a sheet of plexiglass. And plexiglass you basically get to use once and then it's scratched, or in this case, has fish stains on it. And we built just a small table using a couple light stands and some super clamps. And again, all of this stuff we'll have there we can do. We may not have Ray Kurzweil, but the rest of it we can do. Anyway, we get this set up, and I have the assistant crawl under, and I go to do the test shot, and the entire white drop ceiling is reflected in the plexiglass. Well, how do you get rid of white ceilings? You go get a roll of black paper, a couple of ladders, and a couple of staplers. You cover the gentleman's drop ceiling in black paper. Well, that's good. Now we get out of that. Now we do another test shot. My hands are really pale. So I say to the assistant, back to the car, please, and get me a set of black gloves out of my glove compartment. Then we get it all set up, and everything's ready to go. Test shot looks good. Ray comes in and goes, Rick, how are you? And walked right into the table. I say, Ray, we need a reset. But anyway, this is the picture that came out of it. This one here, when they gave me the assignment, this is a gentleman's name is Dr. Mark Fishman. This is done at Mass General. And the editor kind of described it that his work was theoretical. And I get there and he studied zebrafish. Well, I go with the idea of man and computer. And you're still going to make that interesting. But now I have a whole different thing to come up with on location. So what we did is on either side, we took two strobe heads. And you can see how wide the aisles are. And there's water on the floor just to make it more fun. And we put, on the right side, you can see there's a green gel, and then next to that is a blue gel. And I know the colors are going to blend because the heads are really close to each other. So we took a piece of cine foil and put it in between the heads. So I know the colors are going to blend. I don't want it to blend too soon. And then the other side, we did mostly blue and a little green. And then we actually used this, I think I was shooting Canon back then. And we just used a Canon speedlight on him to illuminate his face. So mixing of, but go to your shoots prepared. I have a saying, in photography, and, first of all, we all know nothing ever goes wrong in photography, right? And my line, which I tell the nice people who work with me, is plan for failure. Just assume it's all going to go wrong and plan for that. Now, if you plan for that and something minor goes wrong, or you think you're going to photograph a computer and you're photographing zebrafish, it doesn't throw you. Because the most important thing in any photo shoot is your relationship as the shooter with your subject. That is by far the most important thing. Then the rest of it is just building on that. So that comes back to do your research. And again, a lot of these academics, I'm lucky if I can understand their bios, let alone most of their research. I have attempted to read more textbooks that I don't understand. So this is Jeff Lichtman, and this is his, this gentleman has several rooms that he works out of. This is one of them, and it's a fancy white microscope. There are a lot of white microscopes in little rooms at Harvard. Well, I got a little white room. That's kind of boring. So look at the pattern on the wall behind him. That pattern is actually a slide of his research, which we brought a projector and we projected it on the wall. And again, now I've lit the wall. Now when I light Jeff, I can only have white light directed at Jeff. So if I'm using a softbox or an octabox or a strip light, whatever it is, I'm going to be using an egg crate on it. If I want to narrow that beam of light down even more, sometimes I will take cinefoil and just run a long sheet down both sides of the strip light and bend it in. So I'm very much controlling where the light's going. Then if you look behind the microscope, you can see there are a couple computer screens back there. And microscopes aren't white. I don't know why I decided to make, are white. I don't know why I decided to make this one yellow. And then the final piece of the puzzle on this particular image is if you look at the lenses, and they have this appearance of being rounded, of course, which they are. So we took, I carry a couple of these very inexpensive 25-watt little slave units, and I just leave them in one of my camera cases. And in this case, we stuck a green gel on that little 25-watt second strobe and laid it on the back side of the tray for the microscope. So going into how many strobes does it take to create a picture? In this case, a lot. This is another scientist in a little white room. And we get there and, you know, he holds this test tubes out and goes, well, this is the stuff. And I go, okay, so this is a mixture of strobe and ambient light. If we start looking at the hood, you look into the hood and those lights are just turned on in the hood, okay? The wall is white, so we've gelled the wall because the boring white wall. And then we've lit the professor with white light. And just as we're getting ready to make this picture, Keiko goes, that looks like kryptonite. She grabs the speed light, puts a green gel on it, and she's actually kneeling just below the frame, holding the strobe. This is, I described this gentleman. He was kind of like I got to meet Sheldon from the Big Bang Theory. So he's this incredibly brilliant astrophysicist. And this was a number of years ago where they thought they had discovered an updated version of the Big Bang Theory. So, you know, I talked to his assistant and we agreed we're going to shoot it at the telescope on the roof of the Science Center, the Harvard Science Center. And I say to his assistant, please make sure he brings the red coat. And we get up there and we're going up there and I said, so which telescope do you use? He goes, my telescope's in South America. Like, I wouldn't be caught dead using this one. Anyway, I want to show you what it looked like before we lit it, okay? That's the inside of the telescope. That's Keiko looking thrilled and very cold. And you can see we've opened the top of the telescope, but if I jump back real quick, look at the difference in the color. So what we did on this one is if you take a strobe, right, and you have your camera set on tungsten, or you have your camera set on tungsten and walk outside, what happens? Everything goes blue. Awesome, I want blue. Now we just underexpose it a little bit and it goes bluer. So directly behind the telescope is a speed light that is not color corrected. And then I'm going to jump back to Keiko. And then if you look up on the top of the rim, which is just this wooden frame, we took another speed light, and on that one, we put a CTO filter. So now my strobe is tungsten, my camera is tungsten, so therefore my scientist comes out scientist colored, but my background goes blue with 2 speed lights and 1 gel. Don't do this. And sometimes you just get to work with Santa Claus. This is actually a Christmas trolley up the street from my house in the south end of Boston. And I'm waiting before I start shooting anything. Now I'm watching the light. I want the ambient light in the sky to roughly equal the ambient light from the lights inside the trolley. And then I'm going to light him with 1 strobe on camera at a 45-degree angle with a diffuser. But it's important, you know, mixing your ambient light in the sky and what you're going to add to it. This is Professor E.O. Wilson, and unfortunately, E.O. passed about a year ago. He's a fascinating man to photograph. If you went into his office, don't step on the ants. They're part of the research. But the day he passed, somebody reached out, sent me an email and a clip from their local newspaper and said, "This is on the front page of my paper. This looks like something you would do." And at the end of the day, I found out he had 38 front pages and his book cover. Oh, so that's his last book cover. This gentleman, Professor Lippert, I believe, is his name, and Stephen Lippert is his name, from MIT. And so we go to his office. It's in the Green Building at MIT, and Keiko and I walk in, and the wall of the lobby is a glass block periodic table. So it's a replica of the periodic table made out of glass blocks lit with one fluorescent tube. And Keiko and I looked at each other and said, "We're using this somehow." So we go up to his office, and he informs us how much he hates to have his picture taken, which is what every photographer loves to hear. So anyway, we get talking, we chat with him a bit, and I explain how I see this picture, and he says, "Okay, I'll do it." So we leave him in his office to work. We get downstairs, and we obviously have a light. Now, this is in a lobby of a classroom building at MIT. There are people coming and going. So we have the main light on him, again, very directional, very diffused though. We have 3 different strobes with 3 different colored gels hitting the glass block periodic table, but obviously you want to make sure there's no glare. And then the model is, and I carry fishing wire in my kit of various thicknesses, little skinny wires. So we hung a boom, and we hung that from it. Now, let's get back to a little more light painting. So this is Juliana Nicole, is a wonderful model, and this is actually her car. And we're at a camera store in northern Jersey, Unique Camera, and they have a big loading dock. So we had her literally drive the car into the loading dock, and we could close the doors on both sides, so we could make this loading dock completely dark. Again, we start out, we light Juliana. We don't want to light the car. We just want to light the model. And then we get all that figured out. And then as I'm doing the long exposure, this is actually done during a workshop. So everybody in the room got to shoot a variation of this. And then Karen is running around for 30 seconds, light painting the car. Like I said, there are a lot of different wands you can use for light painting. The one this was done with, and I still use them, are Savage wands. But when they break, they're done because they don't make them anymore. And we'll show you, at M.A.R.S, we'll definitely do some of this. I'm thinking maybe one evening we'll do light painting on the beach. Another triple exposure, with this time with Keiko, because what a photographer's do when they have nothing to do in the studio, they take pictures of each other. But this was actually the first triple exposure that we did. And it's the same process, except this one I light painted. And I can't run around as much as Karen can. This was ClickCon in Detroit. And so we went out, not really sure what this round thing is, but we're actually out on the beach. The dancer is leaping, and Karen is running through the bottom of the frame, making light painting it. But again, here we're exposing, go back, expose for the element you can't control. So I want to make sure I get the proper exposure, so those windows don't go totally dark, or I don't blow them out. So we're balancing the ambient light and the strobe and the light painting. This was from a workshop that we did last fall at T&F Camera in Vineland, New Jersey. Bart Feldman, who owns T&F Camera, is an old friend of mine. Actually, will be at the M.A.R.S school. So this is instead of hiring models for this workshop, we hired a group of knights to be reenactors. And so these 2 gentlemen are sword fighting on a bridge. By the way, we can pick up this bridge and move it anywhere we want. It's just sort of sitting there. And then if you look at it, you can see it's raining, Well, that's because they're dry and I'm dry, but there's a rain machine, so we can actually put the rain where we want it. And then you look in the background and you can see there's smoke back there. So there was a big Roscoe fogger, which we actually came up, going to Home Depot, we came up with a way to control the smoke where we wanted it to go. And then the light painting. So during this exposure, so the models are lit by the strobe for 10,000 of a second, but the exposure is 20 seconds. And during that 20 seconds, Karen is running around, light painting the sword so it looks like this color's coming off the swords. This is the same rain machine, and this is one of the gentlemen from the troop with his hawk. And to give you an idea, right, this took 6 lights to do. This one took 6 lights to do. Again, you know, you want the rain to stand out. You want to backlight it. And you can see we've got lights behind him. We've got the smoke coming up. So a lot of elements in this. I'll bring the big smoke machine and the small one. These are some more of the actors at this event. Well, 3 out of 4 of these people are the actors. So the young lady in the white dress actually is somebody who works part-time for Bart. She's a Rutgers student. But the other 3 people are part of this medieval reenactment troupe called Swords and Stories. And the queen, the woman in red, is yelling at the knights about what a brat her daughter is. And there's actually a little short video where she's yelling at the young lady and then says to the knights, and buy her an ugly pony. And here she is trying to get away from a couple of the knights. What's amazing is that everybody in this is an actor except Natalia, who's, you know, an 18-year-old woman who's just got a great sense of being part of the story. This is something I do at every workshop. So anybody who's going to join us, this is a warning. So we try to do what we call silly group photograph at every workshop. And the idea of silly group photograph is, how do we all think this picture up? How does everybody get in it? How do we light it? This is all done with remote cameras, with remote strobes, and one brand of strobe fires the camera and another brand of strobe fires, transmitter fires the strobes. How do you make all these pieces work? So it's a group picture, but there's a lot that goes into it. So this is out behind Bart's store also. And that's Bart's Model A, which we happen to have the Roscoe fogger under it, blowing smoke out of it. There's a strobe inside of it. And then we intentionally left the other strobes in the picture. And this was the silly group photographs from the medieval workshop. And so this one's got about 65 people in it. And, you know, there was no way we were going to set this up and have it work. So I came up with the idea initially of, I want everybody who's attending the workshop to be photographing somebody who's one of the reenactors, and then we'll make it all a group picture. And this is the only silly group photograph we've ever done with a horse and a hawk. And so this studio is out behind TNF camera. We call it Studio in the Woods. And there's a chapel back there, and you can see Natalia standing on the circular staircase to nowhere, and there are a couple more antique cars back there. It's a terrific place to do a shoot. And it is for rent if you want to rent it. So, so again, this is character I've worked with a number of times, Tio. And he goes by the name Critical Mask. And he creates all these costumes and masks. So he was at the place I was working, and he had this pipe, and you can see the smoke coming out of the pipe. So what we did is we got it set up to have a strobe that was backlit. Obviously, we light him from the front, we backlight the smoke, and then we took the smoke ninja and we made it so it looks like the smoke's coming out of the pipe. This was from a workshop we did in Sharjah, United Arab Emirates. Lit the model with a couple of pro photos, but again, you've got to get that meter reading. Start your exposure with the element you cannot control. The element you cannot control is the ambient light in the background. So I tell people when we start this, take a picture of the sky, get a great exposure on the sky. Now we'll build that exposure into using the strobes. Another model shoot. This was also done at Unique. Again, using smoke. And one of the things when you're working with smoke inside, try to figure out where the smoke detectors are. You don't want to call the fire department every time. So this is, I think there are a few of these in there. This is part of a project. Let me start this. I borrowed this red dress from a designer. I don't know, it must be 5 or 6 years ago. And I showed her the first couple pictures. She said, just keep it. If you'll use it, you can keep it. So this dress is probably in a ball on the couch in the studio at the moment. And I think I've had about 40 different models wear it. And this is in the Boston Public Garden. We're out there, and if you look, you can see I've got light on here. She's lit with one of these little Profoto A10s and the Octaboxes. All of the soft boxes and Octaboxes that are currently made, the new style, you don't have to fight with rods and rings anymore. It's all just click, and they snap together. So setup time is about 30 seconds. So I have one on the model, and then I have one behind the dress on the ground. And again, I'm looking at my ambient exposure in the sky. So there's red dress again. This is at a workshop with ABC in Miami. This is on the lawn of Unique. Got a lot of mileage out of this dress. This one was done with, actually this was done with just speed lights. But that's the same dress. And this is in a studio up in North Tonawanda, New York. And the only thing north of North Tonawanda, New York is Canada. So this is Doug Hansgate's studio. And he has all these outrageous sets that he builds out of styrofoam. So that whole set is carved styrofoam. But we've lit the model with one strobe on her face, one to bring those warm highlights out on her hair, and then one looking over the door with a blue gel on it. So it looks like there's late afternoon light outside. Model who liked hanging upside down our ring. So variation on a theme, a lot of smoke. This was also on the loading dock at Unique. So, and there were no smoke detectors. So I don't have to worry about calling the fire department. This is Keiko. This is 3 speed lights that we controlled using a product
Hey, Rick, we lost your audio.
called Rogue Flash Benders of various sizes. Come on, Keiko, you're not the last slide. Okay, there you go. Whoops. Oh no. Even the computer is telling me to hurry up. So this is, we were doing a shoot and just walking around Boston with 2 speed lights, one on a carbon fiber stand and one on a platypod, which initially was designed really to hold as a way to mount your camera down low. But I use it quite often to put strobes on. I just put a couple of adapters together. So this gear doesn't weigh anything. You can walk around the city with it. This is actually out in front of the studio also. This is the Boston Public Garden, about 10 o'clock on a summer morning, and we showed up with a little trampoline. This young lady is a terrific dancer, and she could have jumped up and down all day for us. And we shot it and left before the Rangers told us to leave. If you try this in New York City, they will be showing up issuing you fines and tickets immediately. In Boston, they just say you're a pain in the neck and go away. This one is something we do a fair amount. If you look at the background here, so she's against a gray background. And this is another pattern that Karen has cut out of stinny foil. And the pattern is probably about 1 foot in front of a speed light. And we're blowing the light through the pattern that's giving us the pattern on the background. Excuse me one sec, leave a little water here. In order to get the colors, we just take sheets of Roscoe gels over it. And again, we can't have white light hit the background, and we don't want the background light to hit the model. Then directly behind the model, there is a strobe that has a grid on it that is facing the camera. It's giving us those highlights on her hair. and then a softbox off to the side that also has a grid on it. This, I just threw this in real quick. Have designed a couple of different lighting kits for Roscoe. And anyway, this is the cover of one of them. This is actually right outside the studio. This was a workshop we were teaching on Cape Cod. We had this wonderful model. I'd say, can you jump off those rocks and look like you're flying? And we just hit her with a strobe. This was done during a workshop in Costa Rica. And it was so dark out there, you couldn't see anything. The only light that was out there was this tiny band of gold light on the horizon. And we had an assistant come out, and it was before I had the current strobes. Today, this would be a lot easier. But the assistants carrying what basically looked like looked like they were carrying a car battery to power the strobe. But again, you have to match your ambient light, read the light in the background, have your strobe fill it in. Run to the last view. This is we out behind the studio. We have a courtyard. I call it the lower 40. In my case, it's feet because it's literally 22 feet by 40 feet. But there's a garden in there, and we do shoots out there all the time. And this is done at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So the first thing we need to do is light the model and have the exposure from the strobes so much that I underexpose the daylight completely so it goes totally dark. So now I've just lit the model, and now I can start adding all my other lights in and my gels, and then she's holding a lantern, and it has one of those little 25 watt second speed lights in it, and it's got a cross screen filter on it, and the Roscoe fogger, and that's what you end up with. There's Bart's car again with a couple of the models. This was done, actually wasn't done during a workshop, it was done in the middle of the night after a workshop in Wildwood in Miami. And we showed up, and it's kind of dark and desolate. The paintings are cool. Down the far end of the street, kind of looked like people were doing pharmaceutical distribution. I took a strobe and put a blue gel on it and flashed it down the street. You can't believe how fast they went away. 2 lights, one behind her, one in front of her. CTO filter on it. A little more light painting. This is in the studio with a curved wall cyc. So I intentionally threw that shadow, and then Karen ran around and light painted the model. Another variation of the young lady standing in front of a plain background. This was actually at a Roscoe booth at a trade show at the Javits Center in New York. So there's like chaos going around, and we just build these studios. This was, I was teaching a workshop for the New England Camera Club Council, their final annual gathering. So I'm supposed to be teaching light painting, and we're out there, this wonderful model at about 10:30 at night. And I'm not quite sure where Batman came from, but he's standing there watching. And I said, can you hold this young lady? And he went, absolutely. And I handed the lights to 2 of the attendees, and I said, you guys run around and paint. So that's what the group came up with. And kind of how I like to do a lot of it. Everybody gets involved. Everybody gets to play with all the toys. Fine photographic equipment. This was done on a shoot in Augustine, St. Augustine, in Florida. And we went, and I think I have the picture. We originally were going to shoot, and we did. We were going to use the Venetian blinds to have somebody looking out, but this young lady who was dressed to start modeling just started dusting. So this was just kind of a goof picture that I really liked. This is in our studio. That is a faux blue backdrop behind her. So we gelled it, and the smoke in this case comes from a product called atmosphere aerosols, and they are literally cans of smoke that you can buy. They're $10. They don't set off smoke detectors. The Roscoe fogger will definitely set off a smoke detector. And like her boyfriend is just offset spraying the smoke. What I think is a good example of high key using ring light. So we want to totally blow that background out and make it perfectly white. And if you look at the catch lights, you can see it is a ring light. This one was go do a portrait of a ultimate frisbee player. That's usually kind of instruction. Go do a picture of. And they told me that she was going to be in Boston. I spoke to her, and it was like she had a match. She didn't have time to post, so I went out to Western Massachusetts, and we went out and we set this up. Obviously, the last little bit of light, and that light's getting better and better the later it gets. But if you look at the light on her, you can see I have a light and strobe in front of her and a strobe behind her, and I intentionally want the drop off in the foreground and the background. And again, start your exposure with the element you cannot control. Oh, and she's back again. Bye, dear. I'll run through the last few pretty quickly. This actually was nothing set up. I was teaching a workshop in Florida, and I'm walking back to my room. And it's like I ordered the woman in red pants to walk down this hallway. So this was actually turned out to be one of my Newsweek covers, but fireworks over the Statue of Liberty. This is the next generation of Sella. So this was part of the ad campaign, and they brought this train up from Washington to Boston so Keiko, Karen, and I could photograph it with the film crew. And they shot fireworks over it. So again, you're exposing for the fireworks, but I'm working with a video crew. So even if I want to use strobes, I can't because that'll mess up their video. And a good video crew gets it, and you work together. And this has been a great crew. I've worked with them since a number of times. So, just one volley on the July 4th concert, go all the way back to Arthur Fiedler. This is what that shell is. And they fire one volley over the top of the shell. And you have to know roughly when it's coming and just be ready. Oh, yeah, you got to hit the exposure. Tower Bridge, this ran double truck in National Geographic. And, again, you're balancing, you're waiting. I'm not controlling any of the lights. All I'm doing is waiting for the right couple of minutes where I'm reading the ambient light in the sky. And if I shoot the picture too soon and I want detail on the tower, well, then the sky's washed out. If I shoot it too late, the sky's completely black. And then you're waiting as the traffic's going through. And if you look at the high streets, I'm waiting for trucks and buses to go through because that's what gives me the high streaks. A variation on a theme. Karen and I were teaching in Paris. So this is, what do you do when you're done working for the day? You go out and shoot some more. So long exposure with Arc de Triomphe. This was obviously Notre Dame. This was about 3 months before the fire. We went and we stood on the opposite side of the Seine and again, waited for the boats to go by to give us those streaks on the water and the feeling of movement. And if your exposures are long enough, you'll see you pick up the stars from the street lights, and that is a product of the lens just being stopped way down. This is John Ratzenberger. I saw this sign, and I was like, I knew he was going to do something. But anyway, and that's a wrap, folks. So thank you all very much for listening and tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed it. I would be happy to answer any questions, and I'd be really happy to see everybody at M.A.R.S.
All right, so let's open this up. Great job, Rick. So let's open this up to some questions. I know we fielded a few already. Some people are intimidated. I know we have a couple.
I'm very intimidating. No, I'm not.
No. Hey, listen, let's start with the first. Let's start with the first one, Rick. I know we have it published on our website, but someone wants to know if there's anything in addition to that, and I'll tell you what's on there that they want that you would like them to bring to the class. Now, what's listed on your landing page is students should bring camera, lens 24 to 70, 70 to 200, or a fixed lens in that range, speed lights or strobes, a tripod, and extra cards and batteries. Now that's what's listed. For anyone that's going to take your class, can you recommend anything else that you'd like them to bring?
Well, I was going to say, I don't know why I stuck with 24 to 70. I happen to like really wide angle lenses. Excuse me. So As far as the strobes, I will bring enough strobes for people to use. I am more than happy to teach people anything I can about my strobes. Like, so with your pro photos, sorry, I just lost one of my earpieces. Or their strobes, as much as I know them. And they're welcome to bring whatever they want. We're only going to have a limited number of models, so we're going to everybody can't be lighting the model at the same time. But hopefully, over the course of this long workshop, we have plenty of time for people to do things. So whatever they would like help with, if you have a light meter and don't know how to use it, bring it, I'll teach you. If you have radios, or any, things I haven't mentioned that you think are really cool and you can teach me.
Well, that's awesome and noble. Now that leads into another question. Actually, a few people, probably because they are intimidated by your prowess, by your backstories, by your pedigree.
Oh, wait, you haven't heard the good part of the backstories. I'm saving those for Mars.
Well, that's the stuff
Wait till you hear some of the good ones.
That's the stuff
That's
for
the
around
best
the
part
fire
of the
pits.
gig, are the backstories.
Yeah. But anyway, so some of the questions, Rick, and we want to be able to address this because we don't want to get in anybody in over their head or whatever. But the class level advertised as all levels, but there are some people that are concerned that they may be, because maybe they're just getting started, they don't feel the confidence, they don't know whatever. And I know you are an open book, and I know you will help anybody, but how do we want to address that, Rick?
Well, I'll tell you, I have a great solution for that. It's called Karen. Because if you come to our workshop and you need some extra help, there are 2 instructors. So we can spend some time individually with you, teaching you the pieces you don't know. This happens, fairly often in workshops where we'll have some people that aren't quite as advanced and as other people. And, what I see happening is those people try to hide in the back of the room. And I have a rule, nobody gets to hide in my workshops, but we will make sure whatever you don't understand, we will take the time to teach you. So, and at the same time, if you're worried, I don't want to hold the rest of the group up. Again, because there are 2 instructors, I can take part of the group and Karen can take part of the group. And Karen and I have been doing these workshops together for, 13, 14 years. Yeah. So we've done a lot of them around the globe together. So no, don't let that intimidate you. And what I will say is, anybody who's listening now, or John, anybody who reaches out to you with a question, give them my email. Have them write to me.
No, 100%. We know that you are accessible. You are, again, an open book.
I don't want people to be intimidated by it.
100%.
So, I could have shown you all, pictures that I just shot available light, but I wanted to show people a variety. And we've had a lot of workshops where, and I love when this happens. So I have people who at the beginning of the workshop are kind of intimidated, they're hiding. And usually it's about halfway through the first day. You can see they get it because all of a sudden they're taking over the set. And that's exactly what we want. We want people to feel comfortable with the gear. Don't worry if you don't have the gear. Don't worry if you don't have lenses. The Tamron's going to have plenty of lenses you can use. Don't worry if you don't have strobes. I have plenty of strobes you can use. I will bring speed lights for Canon, Nikon, and Sony, and I can get them to work on some Lumix cameras.
That's great that you say that, Rick, because there's a lot of aha moments that happen at M.A.R.S, and it's nice to hear you say that because it's we don't want people to feel intimidated in any way.
Well, one thing I was going to throw out, about gear. I mean, Bart from TNF Camera is going to be there, and he's going to have lots of gear that we can use. Bart is used to me going Well, when I'm at the store teaching, which I do a couple of times a year, I'll be there in the fall. But you know, he's used to me going, Bart, we're borrowing this because I want people to be able to try the gear. And look, here's a chance to try gear, not just stand in a camera store for 5 minutes and hold a lens or put it on your camera and photograph the counter the other side of the store. Here's a chance to spend a day or several hours with a piece of equipment. You know, people who are totally intimidated by using transmitters. Once we show them that, it's not intimidating, you know. And that all, you know, we go back to silly group photograph. A part of silly group photograph is for people to, you know, understand how you piece together a very complicated photograph. But, you know, I tell people there's plenty of gear to work with. You're not going to break it. And if you do, I know where to get it fixed. So don't worry about it. You know, no, I mean, that's, you know, here's your chance to play with this stuff. Get a feel for it. Is this the right piece of equipment for me? You know, sometimes people will say, well, I'm going to go out and buy this before the workshop. To which I want to say, well, at least ask me or ask Bart. You know, he will tell you, Bart will never try to sell you anything you don't need. And he is the most loyal customers of any camera star I've ever worked with. It's quite amazing. But yeah, don't be intimidated by, you know, the gear. Certainly don't be intimidated by the photographer. And I remember I said the subtitle of the workshop is Lighting and Laughing. The idea is to come do this and have fun doing it. You know, don't be afraid of it. You know, I promise, whatever fear you have, it won't be there at the end of it. You know, it won't be there on day 2. And that's the beauty of this event.
Yep, that's always good to hear. And speaking of which, Rick, you know, we've got Tamron there that's going to be loaning lenses out. And so that leads into another question that just popped up.
Sure.
Have you used the new Tamron 35-100 f2.8?
I do not have one. No, I have played with it, but I don't have one. The lens that I use a lot, which I really love, but for certain kind of things, is the 35-150, which is a terrific lens. Now, I'll tell you, the 35-100, you lose the extra 50 millimeters on the end, but it's much smaller and much lighter. It's a 2.8 straight through. The 135, the 35-150 is a 2-2.8. So it's got to have more heft because of the f2. But I love that lens, but I'm not carrying it all day. So I think that the new lens, which, like I said, I've played with one, but I don't have one. But from photographers who I really respect who have them, really like them. And it's very reasonably priced. You know, and if you're thinking of buying one, Patty and Ken from Tamron will have them. So you can test it. It's your chance to shoot it before you spend your money. Then we'll be happy to take your money.
Yep. And then you go over to TNF Camera and buy it from them.
That's right. Bart will be there. Yeah, Patty will be there. And that's the beauty of this. You know, you may say, well, gee, I want that 35-100. And then I'll show you my 35-150. And you go, you know, for what I do, that's the lens I want.
Yep.
You know, this gig that we're down here in Phoenix to shoot, a certain amount of it is going to be meetings. How exciting. You know, and I go from one room to another, and I'm not going to light it. I don't want to interrupt the meeting. So I'm doing a lot of available light, and I really like that f2. So it depends on what the photographer wants to do with it. And again, if they have more questions, just send them our way. And we'll be happy to do it. Like I said, I mean, I use probably the 2 Tamron lenses I use the most are the 17-50 and the 50-400. I never use a 70-200 anymore. So, but the 2 lenses I use are fairly slow. They're f4 lenses. The cameras today are so good. This is nowhere near the issue it was a few years ago. Now, if you're shooting in really awful light, well, then you want a fast lens. But I have friends, you know, who have the complete other opinion, whereas they want the fastest lens they can get. They like shooting their portraits at 1.2, or maybe they're going to stop down a lot and go to 1.4. That's not my style. I mean, it's a personal style, you know. I like some depth of field in my portraits, but not necessarily a lot. But again, it depends on what I'm doing. If I'm doing one of those situations where I've got all this stuff in the background that I want to be in focus, you know, then I'm going to go and be stopped down more. So it really, you know, depends on what you want. But, you know, here's your chance to come play with the toys.
Yeah, 100%. All right, if anybody else has any other questions, this will be last call for those. No? No. Some people get shy and then they wait, but
that's okay. You know,
yeah.
Rick at rickfriedman.com.
Yep, 100%. All right, so we're going to wrap it up now. I want to thank Rick for a great presentation.
Thank you.
Yep. Remember, you can study with Rick for an entire week at M.A.R.S 2026.
Rick and Karen.
Rick and Karen, but
Yeah.
exactly. But with less than a week left to register, literally now is the time to sign up before it's too late. Details are on our website. That's www.marsschool.com. That's MARSSCHOOL.com. I'd like to again thank our great friends at Tamron for their help bringing Rick to the school. I want to thank you, Rick, and Karen, for taking the time. For taking the time from your busy schedules to be with us tonight and for the entire week in May. And I want to thank everyone out there for attending tonight. We look forward to seeing all of you at the school. This year's 30th anniversary is going to be epic. So that concludes tonight's webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and we'll talk soon. Rick, thanks again, buddy. I'll talk to you.
Good night and good luck.
Thanks, guy.
Take care.